Hello everyone and welcome to every episode of South Park Season 1 Reviewed. In this series I'll be going through every episode this show has to offer, giving my thoughts on each one, a bit of trivia, as well as a rating from 1 to 5. 1 being completely terrible, 5 being a masterpiece, just brilliant type episode. I've already done this exact thing for The Simpsons and Family Guy, so you can be assured that I will follow through with this for the long haul. I'm really looking forward to covering South Park as it's always been one of my favourites, and I certainly have a lot of respect for it. I have hopes that once we get into the show's prime, its ratings may even challenge classic Simpsons, which up to this point is the best I've had on the channel. So for any South Park fans out there, I would appreciate it if you join me for this journey. And if you do happen to enjoy the vibe of my channel, please consider leaving a like and subscribe. Without further ado, let's get into the first episode of this new series. Season 1, Episode 1. Cartman gets an anal probe. Cartman explains to the boys the odd nightmare he had the previous night involving alien visitors. However, it turns out it wasn't a dream. So my trivia is the I Love to Sing Us song is originally from a 1936 Tex Avery Merry Melodies short. It was sung by the character Owl Jolson, and my best moment was that song, and how the aliens force Cartman to sing it. The series premiere gets a 4 out of 5. It's slightly surprising they went with an alien abduction story to kick the series off, but it was engaging for sure. Kyle's little Canadian brother, Ike, gets abducted by the visitors, which means he has to chase them down all episode, despite not really wanting anything to do with it. Cartman of course refuses to help out and dismisses his experience as a dream, even after his body gets overtaken to have a little stinger. We're already seeing how stubborn Cartman can be. Eventually a massive satellite shoots out of his ass for the ending, which is fitting given the crude humour this episode showed. Taking his opportunity, Kyle is finally able to get Ike back. I did like the revelation that the aliens were actually here for the cows, because they are apparently more intelligent than humans. I don't even blame the aliens for thinking that, honestly. This wasn't crammed full of jokes, but there were decent ones here, like Mr. Garrison saying, "You go to hell and you die," to Kyle, as well as Chef using the visitors as a chance to get with the ladies. Also, it needs to be pointed out, they established a lot of recurring things about the show here, like Stan's crush on Wendy, and how he keeps puking over her. Chef as the helpful friend to the kids, and just how much of a horrible stubborn kid Cartman is. And of course the iconic, "Oh my god, you killed Kenny, you bastards." Even the general vibe of the town you get a sense of, with little touches like the farmer and his cattle, and the incompetent yet chill Officer Barbrady. The stupidity of the townspeople is already coming through. Ultimately, this did most of what you can expect from a pilot episode. Episode 2, Weight Gain 4000. Cartman cheats on an environmental essay contest and wins the prize. Kathy Lee Gifford comes to South Park to present the award, much to the horror of Mr. Garrison. So the vehicle Kathy Lee Gifford is travelling in is a play on the Pope-mobile, bulletproof glass and all. My best moment was the Weight Gain 4000 commercial. I love this one as much as everyone seems to love Kathy Lee. I gave it a 5 out of 5. It's easy to look at this somewhat simple main story, as well as the crude jokes and animation, and write this off as a mediocre early effort. But there really is a lot going on here under the surface. You have some good character stuff between Cartman and Wendy, showing their differences very well. One truly cares about the environment, and actually tries to do practical things to improve any situation she finds herself in, such as trying to talk Garrison out of shooting Kathy Lee. Meanwhile, Cartman only cares about himself, constantly cheating and taking shortcuts in an attempt to get himself on TV. That's where all the hilarious Weight Gain 4000 stuff comes in, such as him saying, "I only weigh 90 pounds, and screaming, "Beefcake, beefcake," over and over. As it pertains to the Kathy Lee stuff, the main thing I noticed was the townspeople and mayor being totally obsessive over it. It says something about why it's so unhealthy to have such levels of celebrity worship. because it can lead to any sense of morality going completely out the window. Mr. Garrison's role here was also a fine take on the JFK assassination, especially his interaction with Bar Brady, and how he is unable to put the basic pieces together. He could be anywhere. In the end, Garrison's scheme only succeeds in killing Kenny, whereas Kathy Lee is able to escape, leaving all the townspeople disappointed. This at first did seem predictable, but even this had some surprising things about it, like Kathy Lee in bed with Chef at the end, and Cartman as an obese blob stuck in his house. Follow your dreams, you can achieve it. He's living proof. Overall, while this was rough around the edges, I still found it very funny, and even slightly thought-provoking. Episode 3, Volcano. Stan's Uncle Jimbo and his war buddy Ned take Stan, Kenny, Kyle and Cartman on a hunting trip in the mountains. But that mountain happens to be a volcano, which is about to erupt. My trivia for this one is that it's coming right for us. Refers to an incident in Colorado where a man shot 3 black bears down from a tree, saying this as an excuse. Matt and Trey actually mentioned this in the Fireside Chat. If you're wondering what that is, a lot of these early episodes have some kind of comedic introduction, with Matt and Trey doing some kind of live action sketch, delivered in their typical sarcastic manner. My best moment was the absurdly terrible Dark Undercover educational video. This one gets a 3 out of 5. I don't have as much to say here, but this episode does the basics well enough. It introduces Jimbo and Ned as characters, and Randy, even though he's far from fully developed of course. The camping trip Jimbo takes the boys on was used for a bit of satire about hunting, with some redneck stereotypes shoved in. There was attempts at some character stuff too, some of it worked. I like how it's shown even this early on, that Stan has a bit of a soft spot for animals. Well, animals not named Scuzzlebutt anyway. However, his jealousy of Kenny, and wanting to prove himself to Jimbo, wasn't fully fleshed out. Probably because Jimbo is just a man's man. He doesn't have time for any of that emotional stuff. The volcano erupting and Scuzzlebutt actually existing are just examples of this show's love for absurd humour. The Duck and Cover video being the highlight in this regard. It's based on an actual video from the 50s, about a nuclear attack by the way. I love how Chef calls it out as bullshit right away, proving once again he is probably the only sane adult in town. I never found this greatly funny, but it had its moments, like Ned's rendition of Kumbaya, and the town rediverting the lava to Denver. Episode 4, Big Gay Owl's Big Gay Boat Ride. When Stan discovers his new dog Sparky is gay, he becomes so confused, he loses his will to play in the big football game against Middle Park. But a visit to Big Gay Owl's animal sanctuary helps him understand. A fact about this one is that it was actually nominated for an Emmy, the same year The Simpsons actually won one, for Homophobia, which also had the topic of homosexuality. The best thing about the episode for me was simply all the animals at the sanctuary. This one gets a 4 out of 5. So let's talk first about what this episode is best known for, which is its dive into the acceptance, or lack of it at times, of gay people. I think it was a wise decision to use Stan's dog Sparky's situation as a metaphor for the real life attitudes some people have towards humans. Using an animal made it so they could make their point in a more subtle way, which on this occasion I feel worked better. It also made all the characters and their harsh language easier to laugh at and accept. Well, except for Mr. Garrison, that is. He has no problem telling Stan that gay people crawled out from the deepest, darkest depths of hell, even though he's gay himself, which is, of course, the irony. The message here is not shoved down your throat, but it's very simply, you should be tolerant of gay people. This is of course shown through Al himself. Not only was his crazy yet cool animal sanctuary nice by itself, the way all the animals were hanging around, having a blast in there, I just like him as a character in general. He's so unapologetically who he is. and doesn't have any shame about it at all. But at the same time, it's not like he has a chip on his shoulder. He always tries to be positive, and is generally patient and tolerant of people, even when they are not being tolerant of him. This is why he comes across as so endearing, and him getting Stan to see the error of his ways, dismissing Sparky, and getting him to take him back, was a very feel-good ending. Now, the side plot of the football match wasn't as good. It plodded a bit at times, and relied too heavily on using the same jokes over and over again, whether it be Pip complaining about his lack of helmet, or the offensive commentator. Jimbo and Ned's role also fell a bit flat for me. It's almost like they felt the need to force them into the story with this whole betting angle. You can tell the show is still working out some of the wrinkles at this point, but as the main plot proves, it was already capable of striking somewhat of a balance between a serious topic and bizarre over-the-top antics. And especially for its time, it was still a somewhat fresh take on the whole LGBT debate. Episode 5. An elephant makes love to a pig. Kyle's mum will not let him keep his new pet elephant because it is so huge, so the boys turn to Dr. Mephisto to genetically engineer a smaller elephant by breeding it with Cartman's pig. A bit of information is this episode has a deleted scene where Shelley sets Stan on fire. The beating was bad enough in this episode, but that's really going above and beyond. The best moment here was pig and elephant DNA just won't splice. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. There are two main things going on here. One is all the nonsense with Dr. Mephisto and trying to somehow breed an elephant with a pig. There were good moments to come from that. Mephisto is an interesting yet weird character who does sum up early South Park in a way. Him and Chef singing the so-called Loverboy song was so bizarre it's funny, as was his big genius idea, the whole point of his work simply being to put more asses on things. He also creates a giant mutant Stan, which ends up going on a rampage through town, which is quite high stakes on paper, but it felt a bit underwhelming to me. At least it does tie back in to the other plotline, when Shelley beats him up with ease. Now about Shelley here. She is clearly being abusive to Stan, but the violence is so over the top that it's hard to take too seriously. They never took things in too much of a dark direction. It's not like there was any serious satire here. The closest we get is Garrison calling Stan a sissy when he finds out his sister is the one beating him up, not his parents. Sadly, that is a reaction a lot of boys in this situation might get. At least Shelley takes the blame for Stan in the end, even if she does beat him up again right after. Episode 6. Death. Grandpa's sole birthday wish is for Stan to assist him in his suicide. Meanwhile, Mrs. Broflovsky leads a protest against the boys' favourite TV show, Terrence and Phillip. According to Trey Parker, this episode was used as a model for the film South Park Bigger, Longer and Uncut. My best moment here was Stan's grandfather trying to provoke Cartman into killing him. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. The Terrence and Phillip story here is very much like the movie, and although I don't think it was quite as good, it at least told a story. It tackles some of the absurdities of censorship, and makes the point of how parents like to, in some cases, blame music or TV shows for their own bad parenting. Kyle's mum is shown as the Karen she is for the first time, and leads everyone to protest. Even her name is close to Karen here. Mrs. Cartman calls her Carol. This is obviously before they decided her name was going to be Sheila going forward. All of the protesters catapulting themselves into the network building was so over the top. And I like how it wasn't even that, but instead all their diarrhea, which caused the network to finally give in. It was also a nice way to include that running gag that had been going on all episode back into the story. Stan's 102-year-old grandpa wanting to die was somewhat thought-provoking, how the boys struggle with the morality of the situation. Just to give my rough opinion, I do tend to believe that someone in Grandpa's position, where they're clearly not going to have any kind of quality of life left, should have the right to end their life with some kind of dignity. But in some cases it could be hard to know for sure the person's intentions. So I understand why people are wary of the government or doctors potentially pushing euthanasia on people. It is still a controversial issue any way you look at it. So I don't blame everyone in town for not wanting to touch it with a 20-foot pole. Even Jesus. At least in the end, Grandpa learns a lesson that it's not right to push all that responsibility on his grandson. Like most of the season, this wasn't filled with a lot of laugh out loud gags, but between Death chasing everyone and stopping to watch the cartoon, and the protesters' actions, as well as of course Stan's grandpa baiting Cartman by telling him he made love to his mum and his dead grandma, there were still definitely things I found funny. Episode 7, Pinkeye, a mishap at the morgue, transforms the residents of South Park into zombies and threatens the boys' night of trick-or-treating. So a bit of a fact here is that the space station that crashes on Kenny is meant to be the Soviet-developed Mir, and my best moment was Chef's zombie version of Thriller. This one gets a 4 out of 5. This does share the same problems the rest of this season has, being slightly slow-paced at times, and not being crammed full of jokes. This episode makes up for it, with some very engaging Halloween-themed action. This time, instead of dying near the end, Kenny's untimely demise happens at the start, and is used to kick things off. You see 2 incompetent mortuary workers embalm his body with Worcestershire sauce, causing him to rise from the grave as a zombie. Everyone he bites gets infected too, causing zombie fever to spread across the town. They make good use of the spooky vibe, with the dead eyes look of Kenny, and the appearance of all the zombies, as well as the violent, bloody showdown Stan and Kyle put on for the finale. Even the whole absurdity of the whole Worcestershire sauce thing, with the helpline and stuff, added to things in a weird way. I have to say, I actually live like an hour's drive away from Worcester, but I still can't stand Worcestershire sauce. In addition to all these spooky zombie stuff, you also have the side thing of the costume contest going on at school, which has some good moments between Stan and Wendy, and Cartman dressing up as Hitler fits in perfectly. Even when Principal Victoria tried to change his controversial look, she made him look like a KKK member instead. Gotta love everyone's incompetence on this show, and how the incompetence always conveniently manages to rear its head in the most offensive ways possible. As mentioned, the Chef's sing-along to a parody of Thriller is a classic. Not only are the lyrics amusing, you've gotta love the voice of Isaac Hayes, especially that note at the end. Episode 8, Starvin Marvin. The boys accidentally agree to adopting an Ethiopian child while trying to get a sports watch, mistaking Cartman for the African child. The government sent him to Ethiopia, where he runs into Sally Struthers. My trivia for this one is that whenever the sports watch is seen, the time displayed is 4:20. Seems about right. My best moment was the charity advert. This one gets a 5 out of 5. This episode is full of absurd, exaggerated satire and cynical looks at humanity. Despite that, it managed to remain funny pretty much throughout, so props on that. Not every show can pull it off. The most obvious bit of satire here is how the more well-off first world nations handle charity. Is the money really helping, or does a lot of the money get wasted? Or worse yet, just pocketed by some corrupt people? And do people like to think that they're actually helping, just so they can pat themselves on the back? Or are they actually helping in a practical way? The portrayal of Sally Struthers is over the top by design. She apparently got pretty annoyed. She was depicted as stealing food from the charity, hoarding it from all the hungry Africans. And I can understand why she would be annoyed to some extent, but quite simply, the image of a fat woman being the spokesperson for starving African children is ironic and primed for mockery. In a clever way, they even draw a parallel to how the starving Africans are treated, and how we treat people in our own countries. Kenny's family's plight is made into entertainment. how everyone's always condescending to him about his financial status. They even try to make him grab cans of corn, like he's on some kind of game show, getting tossed about in this thing, and he only gets one can in the end. Like, they couldn't just give him all the cans, they had to make him work for it for their entertainment, in such a bizarre way. They make it clear the mayor and the rest of the townspeople don't care at all about him or his family's well-being. I want to talk about Marvin a bit. Even with how little he does, he's actually a very likeable character. He has a very calm demeanour, in contrast with all the craziness around him, and it's great to see how he starts copying Cartman's phrases. He even saves the day for his people in the end, by bringing the defeated turkeys back to Ethiopia. Speaking of the turkeys, that side of things also brought the jokes, like Chef not being able to get over the weird looking psychic of Mephisto, and how the turkeys have their own brave heart to counter Chef. That final battle was a nice action-packed way to finish things off. I also have to give credit where it's due. Cartman was kind of a hero here too. He was the one who exposed Sally Struthers. Sure, he did it for his own needs, but still, you have to take whatever wins you can get with that boy. Episode 9, Mr. Hankey, the Christmas Poo. While South Park Elementary is attempting to stage a holiday play that will not offend anyone, Kyle is checked into a mental asylum. The most interesting bit of trivia I could find about this one is that it's the first episode to contain a live action scene, the weird little commercial with the kids. My favourite moment was Cartman singing Kyle's mum's a bitch. This one gets a 3 out of 5. On one hand, this is not an original premise, in that the protagonist sees a magical being which only they can see, so no one believes them, but it turns out to be real after all. On the other hand though, a talking poo being a Christmas mascot is about as original as it gets, so it was interesting in that sense. Mr. Hankey did turn out to be an iconic recurring character, so you could call this episode a success based solely on that count, even if I personally never found it amazing or truly gripping. The satire here is still relevant today, about how easily offended people get over every little thing, which is only amplified at Christmas time. This episode takes a different side to what we usually see, in that it almost embraces the commercialism of Christmas. If it's the buying and receiving presents that makes Christmas what it is for you, that's fine. If it's hanging out with family and friends, great. Or if you're deeply religious and that's the only side you care about, that's perfectly okay too. But you shouldn't be so bothered with the opinions of others, and try not to take your own beliefs too seriously. I think that's good life advice in general. I always try to live with that in mind. Overall, this did most things fairly well. Just nothing stands out too much for me, aside from all the gross out humour involving Mr. Hankey and how he gets shit on everyone, which I'm undecided on whether that's a positive or negative, to be honest. Episode 10, Damien. After being shunned by the other kids, Damien, the son of Satan, calls upon his father to fight Jesus in the ultimate pay-per-view boxing match. So Damien's theme music here is a take on A.V. Centani from the film The Omen. Incidentally, the name Damien is also a reference to the films. My best moment was how Satan cons everyone out of their money by throwing the fight. I gave this one a 2 out of 5. Maybe I'm in the minority, but this has never been an episode which stood out to me. It's mainly because I don't particularly like Damien as a character. I know he's meant to be cool with his powers and all that, but he's completely devoid of charisma, and is frankly not a funny character. The boys think that too, as a good chunk of time here is spent with them picking on him, and of course Pip. Now I'm not going to complain about the characters being too mean on South Park of all shows, but like anything, when it's overdone it gets a bit much for me. Jesus fighting Satan in a boxing match never made any real sense, but at least they got a decent moment out of it. Jesus being forsaken by everyone, betting on Satan, only for Satan to throw the fight, was a solid ending. Jesus was right all along. You will never win betting on evil. Why? Well, because evil will always find a way to screw you over. Cartman's mum throwing this ridiculously extravagant birthday party for him was okay, but not really related to the main plot. It was mainly there to show off Eric's colossal ego and narcissistic personality. It did succeed as an early episode showing off those character traits, so it did accomplish something. Outside of that though, especially for repeat viewings, it's kind of just there. So yes, giving this a 2, under my rating system, calls this a bad episode, which may be slightly harsh. It's certainly close to being decent. It's just me. I don't enjoy watching this very much. Episode 11, Tom's Rhinoplasty. While Mr. Garrison takes a break from class to get a nose job at Tom's Rhinoplasty, the boys all compete for the attention of the substitute teacher. My trivia for this one is whenever Mr. Garrison turns up with the David Hasselhoff face, the 1978 song Shadow Dancing by Andy Gibb plays. Quite a funky tune it is as well. I quite like me some Andy Gibb music, which might sound strange to say for a male my age, but so be it. I've always liked the Bee Gees as well, and their younger brother Andy was just as talented. My best moment was Chef singing No Substitute for Miss Ellen. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. There really isn't much to this. Mr. Garrison gets a ridiculous nose job, and the boys get a new substitute teacher Wendy is jealous of. That's it. As ever with South Park, it's the absurd places they go with it, which produces the entertainment. For Mr. Garrison, it's the fact that the nose job inexplicably makes him look like David Hasselhoff. It's so funny how they just impose an image of his head onto Garrison's body. That, along with the groovy music, really sells his new brief life as a model. It's no surprise Garrison is not cut out for it long term. The main plot here is a bit of a infamous one. I don't know the majority opinion on it, but it's obviously contentious just because of the ending. Prior to that, there were a few funny moments, like Chef's song. I love how he provides his own backup vocals by covering his mouth with his hand. There's the boys literally licking a carpet to try and become lesbians, thanks to some more terrible advice by Miss Cartman. But to go along with the entertaining stuff, Wendy to me did get annoying at times. Her constant high-pitched screaming and freakish behaviour was a bit much, and the ending was super out of character for her. I mean, she has this poor woman kidnapped and shot into the sun. Pretty extreme stuff. I kind of get it, as some absurd shock humour, but up until this point, the show had never shown her in this kind of light at all. She's never even shown a slight sign of being capable of this. And given how they handled the character going forward, this episode really sticks out like a sore thumb. Imagine Wendy doing something like this in a more recent episode. It just wouldn't happen. Still, I do find it a bit ironic, given how well Cartman is known for the Scott Tenorman episode, when it was actually sweet little Wendy who committed a malicious act of murder first on the show. Episode 12, Mecha-Streisand. The boys discover a prehistoric relic that is desperately wanted by Barbara Streisand. Little do they know, she threatens to destroy South Park and the whole world. So some rather interesting trivia is that guest star Robert Smith recorded his lines over the telephone and was not given the context. He was told it would be funnier that way, and I kind of agree. The way he delivers the lines in such a mundane way, with all the chaos going on around him, is a naturally funny juxtaposition. My best moment was the battle at the end, between Mecha-Streisand and all the other giant robots. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. Everyone who knows South Park is aware that the show often mercilessly mocks celebrities, especially ones Matt and Trey happen to dislike, and they did, at that time at least, have a genuine distaste for Barbara Streisand. Apparently this is because she once called people from Colorado a bunch of hicks. They really do go all in on roasting Barbara, portraying her as a fame-obsessed villain who is out to destroy everything in her path. After a scene of Pip, then Cartman, then Kyle, finding a mysterious triangle, it's revealed that Barbara already has a matching one, and is searching for the other. Once she finally gets the kids to herself, she chains them up and gets a hold of the triangle by threatening them with her terrible singing voice. She then proceeds to perform some kind of ritual that transforms her into a giant robot that goes on a rampage through town. But don't worry, Leonard Martin, Sidney Poitier, and even Robert Smith step in to try and stop her madness. Yes, this is all as bizarre and insane as it sounds. For the most part it works, mainly because the finale of the battle of all these giant robots was very cool to see. The animation by this show's standards was actually decent, and I love the kaiju type energy. You can tell that Matt and Trey have a massive respect for Japanese culture in general, so this was a nice way to showcase it. Other less flashy things I liked was the real life background scene when Chef was driving the guy up the mountains, and how the boys can't help but refer to Streisand as a massive bitch every time they encounter her. This was a very memorable episode that was close to a 5, it just never quite had that next level of comedy to get me there. Episode 13. Cartman's mom is a dirty slut. Eric Cartman wants to find out who his father is. Turns out it could be anyone who attended South Park's 12th annual Drunken Barn Dance. So something about this episode which I'm assuming is a mistake is that Mephisto says that one of the possible fathers is the 1989 Denver Broncos. However, the announcer calls them the 1991 Denver Broncos. My best moment was just Cartman's over-the-top acting, like a stereotypical member of the race he thinks his father is. The season finale gets a 3 out of 5. Despite me not being this episode's biggest fan, I do have to admire them trying something like this so early on, structuring it in a unique way, and ending season 1 on a cliffhanger. Who is my father? That's the question Cartman seems to be preoccupied with, and is desperate to find an answer to. This episode takes a while to get going, and they replay a very similar scene of Cartman's mom with various people at the bar dance numerous times, so that, along with me not finding the jokes that funny, is why this never fully clicked with me. Don't get me wrong, there were some nice bits here and there, pretty much all involving Cartman, like when he thinks his dad is Native American, or a black man, etc. He starts dressing up in such a over-the-top, stereotypical way. His ability to flip-flop his identity and personality for his own personal gain is peak Cartman behaviour, as was his face going red with rage, finding out Stan and Kyle sent his stuffed animal tea party into America's funniest home videos. At least he got his $3,000 for the DNA test, so it's not all bad. I guess there is also some comedic value in just how much of a slut Leanne Cartman is. Like damn, how thirsty for cock can a woman be? Every time she sees a new man, she immediately wants to do it with him. Heck, not even just men, even most of the women in town have apparently slept with her. As outrageous as it all is, it does at least set up the cliffhanger in a somewhat believable way. Now I will get to the follow-up to this episode in the Season 2 review, not immediately mind you, but I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. For now, this was an okay end to the season. Okay guys, welcome to the Season 1 recap and summary. This season's overall average score was 3.53. There's no point including a bottom 5 list, as there was only one 2 out of 5 episode, but my top 5 were Pinkeye at 5, Big Gay Owl's Big Gay Boat Ride at 4, Mecha-Streisand at 3, Weight Gain 4000 at 2, and my personal favourite was Starvin Marvin. I'm gonna try and give you my detailed thoughts on the season now, but I find it kind of hard to sum up this season with some easy sound bites, because it was unique in many ways. If you were to take some kind of formal writing class, for example, I doubt this is how they would recommend to start off a new cartoon. A lot of the tried and true templates, like trying to create endearing characters, or slowly easing us into the show, were tossed aside, in favour of lots of crude humour, many subversive moments, especially the endings to episodes, and of course some razor-sharp satire. Once the target for ridicule is picked, they are often brutally set about, all episode long. I don't think it's any surprise this show caught on so quickly, and eventually became somewhat of a cultural phenomenon, because it's exactly the type of unapologetic adult comedy that will always be in demand. I mentioned earlier that the main characters aren't particularly likeable. Well, that's only partly true, to be fair. Stan and Kyle are not fully developed yet, and are still fairly similar to one another at this point, and Kenny is purely a one-note character who dies in every episode, bar one. Despite this, they all have their funny moments, so that makes them likeable to some extent. And then you have exceptions, like Chef, who is portrayed as a mostly good person. The point to characters like Mr. Garrison, and especially Cartman of course, is to be such bad people. They often act as almost antagonists to the story, despite often being the main character of it. It's all a bit of an odd mix, but it's well written enough to still come across well, despite, in my opinion, not even being at the prime of the show yet. It will take a few more seasons before we really see the best of South Park, but I will still have fun seeing how the show developed in the meantime, and I hope you guys continue to join me for seasons 2, 3 and beyond. If you enjoyed this particular video and don't want to miss more, please be kind enough to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Take care.